So, hi, this is Michelle, and this is the next episode of Not a Standard. So, today we have a special guest who happens to be one of my brother's best friends from college. We actually connected during my brother's wedding, but funny, not so funny story. I was actually sick at my brother's wedding and had lost my voice. So, Ryan actually did all the talking for me. So, we didn't reconnect until a year or so later when I saw him on social media, and I just loved what he stood for and what he was all about. So, with that being said, many of him know him as Make Life Happen on Instagram, where he shares the cutest videos of his two rescue dogs, who are both deaf.
Yeah.
But to me and my brother, he's so much more than a dog dad or an influencer on social media. He's someone who has overcome a lot, someone who cares, and just someone who, deep down inside is a good person, and that's something rare to find. So without further ado, I'd like to officially welcome James to the podcast.
I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. And can I just say at that wedding, by the way, I didn't know anybody. And of course your brother was so busy because he's getting married. So having you guys there was really nice to be able to chat with you, even if you were sick. So
yeah.
And before we start anything, can I just say I'm really excited to do this. I've been following you on social for a while now. I've been following your story, and you're just such an inspiring person. And I think
Thank you.
something that really goes overlooked is just your willingness to be self-reflective. And we're going to get into this a little bit. We'll talk about it, but just to be vulnerable, it's something that is really hard for people to do. And when you overcome something, I think a lot of times people look at you, and a lot of folks try to paint a perfect picture, and it's important to kind of be honest with yourself when things aren't going well or when things are difficult. And I have admired so much you sharing your journey in that way. If you're having a good time or going through something great, you share it. And if you're struggling, you're so open about that. And I really admire it, and I'm excited to support you and to be here. And I appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you. I'm right back at you. Like, I love your captions and just sharing the highs and lows. And I feel like that's something that is rare to find on social media. So,
but that's life. It's life.
Yeah. So thank you so much. So if you're okay with it, can I just dive right into the questions?
Dive right in. Let's go.
Okay. So I know you have such an amazing and inspiring story. And sometimes I feel like that gets lost on social media because you're known for your dogs. So if you don't mind, can you share a little bit of your story and the things that you've struggled with in the past?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're absolutely right. It gets lost. Multiple times people have said that I'm a pet influencer, and I'm not that, or at least I'm not intending to be. I've just been sharing my experience on social media. And from the very beginning, it's been about more than that. It's been about just my journey. I am somebody who has been in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction for a very long time. We'll be celebrating, hopefully 12 years of sobriety in December. And so do you want the short version or long version? I can be a little long-winded, but I think it's important when talking about your story to give some context, right? So every story has a lot of different things that maybe led to that place. But I also think it's important for people to know that regardless sometimes of outside situations or factors, if you are dealing with something on the inside, that stuff doesn't matter, and you can still struggle and still come upon hard times. So I'll give you, I guess, the medium length version of this, but I could go on for a long time. I think it's important to first just say I had a great upbringing. I had wonderful parents. I have 3 siblings. We grew up, we had enough, things were good. And I lived in a small town in north central Massachusetts. My parents decided to homeschool us because the school system in my town had a lot of issues at that time, and they were running a small business, and they just devoted a lot of their time and energy to making sure that we got an education. And for all intents and purposes, we had a great upbringing. There was nothing that somebody would have said was wrong with the way I was raised or any of that stuff. But throughout my life, kind of from a young age, I always had a feeling of being an outsider, an outcast. And you hear that a lot from folks who struggle. Like there was some void that I was feeling, and I would do whatever I could to kind of fill that void and try to feel better. Sitting with myself was really uncomfortable. And when I finally did go to school in high school for the very first time, I was a really fearful person, just afraid that people wouldn't like me, afraid I wasn't going to be good enough. And those fears, drove me to start drinking and using drugs at a very young age. Uh, but throughout that time, high school, college, things went really well for me. I think I would describe it as functional. I
Mhm.
experimented with drugs and alcohol. I think the first time I did, I thought that I had discovered some magical answer to the universe, like, oh, this is how everyone gets through life, because
Mhm.
I was so uncomfortable in my own skin, and I needed an escape from that, something to numb that. And during high school, college, I was able to go through and get good grades. I graduated with a business degree. I had friends, a great social life, and so there weren't really any consequences to what was going on. I just wasn't aware that I was using drugs and alcohol as a solution to my problem. And a lot of
Mhm.
people think drugs and alcohol are the problem. They're not. They're the fix, right? There's no matter what you're going through, and it doesn't have to be addiction. The fix is the thing that's hurting you. It's not necessarily the problem that's driving you to do those things. And so I graduated college, I got a business degree, things were great. And eventually, what happened was right at the end of school, I ended up having a difficult breakup. I was in a long term relationship, an individual who, throughout my college years, I neglected because of drugs and alcohol. And that finally came to a head. And this was entirely my fault. But that transition of leaving college, getting out of a long term relationship, moving back to a small town with your
Yeah.
parents, no job, that was really, really hard for me. And right around that time was the peak of the opiate epidemic in north central Massachusetts. And funny enough, Anthony Bourdain, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him,
Mhm.
Michelle, but he actually did an episode on the opiate crisis before he passed away. And the episode was centered around my little three-town region. And
Oh,
I
no
had no
way.
idea. Yeah, I had no idea at the time that we were right in the heart of it. And
Yeah.
and what it looked like was you'd go to a party and people would say, I know you're going through a tough time. I can see it
Mhm.
on your face. Here, try this pain pill, try this, try that. And I didn't have another solution or a way to deal with those things. And eventually one thing led to another until one day I woke up and I was sick. I
Yeah.
I needed something, unless if I wanted to not be sick, and that's when it got really scary. So
Mhm.
flash forward, a few months, I was completely dependent and ended up selling all of my possessions. I ended up lying and hurting the people in my life that I cared for the most. I ended up stealing. I was kicked out of my home, and only at that point, when I lost everything, and including at one point my freedom, did I finally find a solution to that problem. But it's a lot of people see my life today and they go, "Oh, things are going really well for you." It's been very dark in the past. I had to lose everything to get to this place, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, I'm sure, in,
Yeah.
in this podcast. But today, life is beautiful, and it's
Mhm.
my goal to show people that things can get better and you can overcome
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that and love your story. And I feel like in your story, it was almost like normalized, like drugs and
Mm-hmm.
alcohol. It's like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
normal thing to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with it. There's no like side effects. There's nothing bad
Nope.
about it. And I feel like as a homeschooled kid, you probably also didn't really know. Is that
All that fear
accurate?
of wanting to fit in, that fear of wanting to be liked, combined with feeling a pain inside and having it be completely normalized. You're 100% dead on. It was everywhere, and it was something that everyone was doing, and it seemed like a very mild thing. Prescription medication is what this was, and I know I'm not the only one. There were
Yeah.
there were so many millions who fell into the opiate epidemic, but eventually when those pills wear off and you're getting sick, what happens is people turn to the only drug they can afford, that is an opiate that will keep them from being sick, and that's heroin. And it's a really scary place to be. And I became an IV drug user, and people called me a junkie and hopeless, and all of that stuff regularly. And so it's a scary path, and
Hmm.
regardless of your upbringing, that can happen if you don't have the tool set to kind of deal with some of this stuff that goes on the inside.
Yeah, and like I feel as somebody who has struggled with an addiction like mine to exercise and
Yeah.
restricting food, like I can say that like lifestyle changes are like the hardest to make. And I feel like it
Hmm.
was just so hard because I wanted to be healthy and happy. Yet
Yeah,
I just like couldn't take the steps to get there. And I just remember feeling like embarrassed and feeling like a lost cause and feeling like an
yeah,
obligation and like something that needed to be fixed.
yeah,
And like just feeling so guilty that I was like
yeah.
dragging people down with me. And
Horrible.
yeah, the reason I'm sharing this is because I can imagine it's very similar. Like you're nodding your head
Hmm.
up and down. And but
Big
in
time.
your I'd love to hear like your words. Like how did you feel when you were struggling?
Oh, it's horrible. And I think I talk about this a lot with people, whether they're in recovery or not, or just asking about it. And when I was in active addiction, me is still in there, right? The
Hmm.
same person you grew up as and who you've always been is there. And the way I describe it to people is feeling completely trapped,
Hmm.
feeling just like I'm imprisoned. And
Hmm.
it's not. Some folks react to that statement and think that you're trying to, I guess, deflect responsibility for the things that you did. And that's not what the statement's about. It's just trying to get people to understand that people in active addiction or dealing with a struggle of any kind are not, they don't love that. They want
Hmm.
out most of the time and they don't know how to do it. And so for me, I felt completely
Hmm.
trapped and I did not know how to get out. And typically only when someone has lost enough, when they're desperate enough, are they willing to do what it takes. If you want to get to a place you haven't been to, you got to go and do things you haven't
Hmm.
done. And for me, that was the case. And when I was finally desperate enough, I finally started listening and connecting with folks who had done it before. So yeah, trapped, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I just remember like feeling like every single day was torture. That's what I would tell my mom. And it's
Yeah,
like, I can't do this like every single day. Like I'm counting the
yeah,
calories and like I just want to be normal. Like
yeah.
I just want to go out and eat and not like feel guilty. And you probably wanted to just be sober and just enjoy life and be happy. And
You
it's
just
like,
can't find a way. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know you mentioned that you made a change, but like what made you decide to make that change and like actually make the change and not just decide and then be like, ah, you know what, I'm having a hard day, so I'm just gonna use again. Like, yeah, like I can
Yeah.
totally relate because of
Hmm.
anorexia and everything else. It's like, oh, just bad day. Like, it won't matter if I do it again.
Yeah, it's important to first say there were bumps in the road. Like it wasn't a just I'm doing this and it just goes perfectly and now I'm sober. No, there
Hmm.
were
Yeah.
relapses along the way. But what kind of put me into that position, I talked about it before, it was desperation. I had no other choice. It was that or die. And
Hmm.
that's how it was described to me. I had lost my freedom at one point. Um, and when that happens, you're forced into a situation. And then when I got out of it, I went into an inpatient rehab. And during that time as well, there's no access to the
Hmm.
substance. So that's your opportunity. It's not going to fix the problem going into a place like that, but it's your opportunity to at least rid yourself of the physical dependence part of it. And
Hmm.
at that point, I was so miserable that I just wanted to understand how to beat it. I knew that people had told me they got sober. I met folks through different programs that had done it before. And when you're desperate enough, that's when you're willing to try. And that's why people call it a gift of desperation, because most people, if they wanted to, could apply these tools, but they don't because they're not desperate enough. So at that point, I'd lost everything: my family, my friends, my possessions, my freedom, all of it. And I just I put my hands up. I made my way with a trash bag of clothes in my car to a recovery meeting outside of Boston, and I just said, "I'll do anything. Just help me."
Hmm.
And those people, they gave me places to live, they gave me couches to sleep on, and they said, "We've been through this before, and we can show you how to get out, but you got to listen." And
Hmm.
that was the start of the journey, and what really pushed me forward into recovery was just not having any other choice, because the other alternative was I'm in jail or I'm going to die,
Yeah.
one of those two things.
Yeah. So you went like inpatient for like a rehab
Yeah, I
facility?
did inpatients, outpatients, you name it.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
it was, yeah, 100%.
Just
Yeah,
different
for
things.
sure. And
What is that like what does that program look like? Like
well, there were different ones. I mean, so I inpatient for me could be everything from you're going to this rehab, you're living there every day, and we do 10 AA, NA meetings a day, and
Mhm.
that's what we do. To a time when I had, a lot of suicidal thoughts. I didn't want to live anymore, and I was forced into a place where, um, I wasn't allowed to leave. And
Yeah.
again, meeting with therapists, meeting with other people who are struggling, counselors, all of that sort of stuff. But what really did it for me was after those programs,
Mhm.
when I had connected with some people who said, "Hey, there's a pretty amazing community outside of these places, and it's not just for old people. There's young people meetings, there's meetings for every different type of individual, and
Mhm.
that community, once you connect with it, they hold you accountable, they call you on your BS, and you can't prove them wrong because they're sitting there with years of sobriety and success, and so you're forced to listen. But I had a wide range, a wide spectrum, to answer your question, of different kind of rehabs and treatments during that time.
Was there anything else that helped you, like, on the hard days besides having that community?
Yeah, and it was learning to stay present, whether it's through meditation. If you're in a 12-step program, you'll probably get a sponsor. It's not the only
Mhm.
way to get sober or recover from whatever struggle you're going through. That was just my experience.
Mhm.
But no matter what community you connect with or what you're trying to overcome, one of the biggest and most important tools in getting well from this stuff is simply learning how to stay present. And it sounds like a cliche, but the way I describe it to people and the way it was described to me was that we live our life in so many different moments besides this one. We are ruminating on past moments, just constantly thinking about mistakes we made or places we've been,
Mhm.
or we're constantly stuck in a future moment that we'd rather be in. Like I'd rather be doing this right now, or rather be doing that right now, and we lose sight of the moment that's right in front of us. And I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to ask this horrible nagging question of, how am I ever going to blank, whatever the thing is? How am I
Mhm.
going to get sober for 11 years? How am I ever going to build a career? How am I ever going to pay my student loans? Whatever the question is, I just kept dwelling on that moment. How am I going to do it? And as human beings, like, when we don't have the answer to a
Yep.
question, the inevitable conclusion we come to in our minds, if we can't answer that question of how, is, well, it's never going to happen. And so it's
Mhm.
just a destructive mindset. And I was taught, if you can slow down, if you can stay right here, right now, you can have a thought, observe it, and say, oh, that's interesting. This is a fear I'm feeling. This is a discomfort. I'm feeling depression right now.
Mhm.
And just sit back and take an outside view, rather than jump into that thought or jump into that emotion and go to a different moment in time. If you can just focus on this one, the how part of those questions is going to manifest in ways you never imagined, right?
Mhm.
The doors are going to open. And if you're staying present, you're going to be able to see them, and you're going to be able to walk through them because you're living in this moment. So that was the biggest thing in my life, was through meditation and other practices, learning how
Mhm.
to focus on now, and not past or future.
Yeah, I feel like in a way, like one thing that helped me too is just like allowing myself to be imperfect and not putting myself like
Oh
through the
yeah.
pressure of like getting through like 20 years of being like perfect with my
Yeah.
food and my fitness and everything else and just kind of
Yeah.
like not following behaviors because like I had that like okay, I screwed up today, so I'm going to do better tomorrow kind of thing. Like I know
Right.
you can't do that, but
No,
but just
no,
like that idea of imperfection and not like
I
putting the stress
completely
on
agree.
yourself.
I completely agree. I one of the things that I find everyone has in common when they have overcome something really difficult in their life is they are willing to, and I talked about it at the beginning of the podcast
Mhm.
too, is just how I watched you and your ability to be vulnerable, to
Mhm.
acknowledge when something is difficult, and to be self-reflective. And most people really struggle to do that. We live in a time, whether it's on social media or in person, that everyone has this self-image that they want to portray, and oftentimes it's of perfection. And
Mhm.
only in recent years have I seen it become more popular, uh, thank goodness, to not have to be perfect anymore, to
Mhm.
accept that we're all trying to figure this thing out, we're all trying to get through it. And by sharing that, when you project perfection, you're not helping anybody,
Yeah.
because you need to share what you're going through, and when you do that, you find that it connects and it resonates with other people,
Hmm.
and that's the key to really realizing you're not alone and realizing
Hmm.
you can get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
It's
So,
amazing.
yeah. So I have to ask, are there any
Yeah.
particular routines or habits that you follow daily
Yeah,
now?
always. I mentioned meditation before. That can look different for a lot of people. For me, it just means getting outside or sitting somewhere quiet and just taking time to focus on breathing for a second.
Hmm.
It just brings you down to this moment, and you're able to kind of process any fears you're having about that day. You're able to process any emotions that you're feeling, and just kind of help you to reset when you wake up in the morning. Oftentimes when we wake up, at least for me, I don't know about others, but I'm very fearful when I wake up. I have a lot of anxiety. I have a
Hmm.
lot of I guess fear of dread, impending doom, that's of things coming up, things I have to do, tasks,
Hmm.
chores, whatever the case may be, something at work. So taking that quiet time to disconnect, to unplug, you've mentioned it to me before, that it's
Yeah.
a tool that you've used as being really helpful. And it doesn't mean that life's going to be perfect every day.
Hmm.
That life still happens, and I want to make sure that I talk about that. But life is still going to happen. Hard days are going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you can at least take a few moments, if I were to offer one tool, just take a few moments to just sit back, process, focus on breathing, and remember where you are. It can be tremendously impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. That and dogs, right?
Well, dogs help.
You just need dogs too.
Just, yeah, I mean, everyone should rescue a dog. I just want to put that out there. Uh, Everybody who can provide a safe and loving home for an animal and devote time and energy to them. If you're that kind of person, just do it.
Yeah.
Just go do it. It'll make your life better.
Yeah. As many may know, like he's the dog dad of not only one but two deaf dogs. So I
Mm.
just want to get into that right now because what inspired you to get a dog and a deaf dog?
Yeah,
Because I feel like
anyone watching this who follows my page are like, dude, when are you going to talk about pound cake and
yeah,
milkshakes?
yeah.
Like, what is wrong with you? What is all this? I tell people on my page all the time. I say, if you're here for dog stuff, just so you know, you're going to have to deal with sobriety and mental health stuff. And if you're here
Yeah.
for sobriety and mental health stuff, you're going to get blasted with dog content. So, stick around if you want to. And a lot of folks have, which has been cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've got two deaf dogs, Pound Cake, Milkshake. They were both rescues, and a lot of times differently abled animals, deaf, blind, senior dogs, they get overlooked. In Milkshake's case, she wasn't adopted for 3 years. She's a beautiful dog. She's
Mhm.
wonderful, and she sat waiting for 3 years because people said, "Oh, she's deaf," and either they were afraid to take that on, or didn't know what it would look like, or they just thought that she was less than, and that's just not true. They're amazingly capable animals, and I try to show that as much as I can.
Mhm. So what inspired you to get pound cake first?
Oh
Because you
boy.
didn't want the dog,
Yeah,
right?
no, no, not at all. Well, so it's not that I didn't want a dog because I don't like dogs. That was never the case. I had dogs growing up. Like
Mhm.
it was that Leah's my wife, and she and I had at the time a very, very active lifestyle. We liked to
Mm.
travel. We have to like to up and go and do things, and we also worked a lot of hours. Leah
Yeah.
works three different jobs. She's one of the
Wow.
hardest working people I've ever met in my life, and she is very busy individual, and so am I. And so I just kept saying to her, it would be great to have a dog, but how are we going to manage that? How are we going to
Mm.
balance it? Is it going to slow us down? Are we going to be able to do the things that we like? And it's the same old pattern for me, which is, being afraid of something that I haven't experienced yet
Mhm.
without actually trying. It's just my brain thinks it has all the answers before it
Yeah.
does. And one thing I have learned now, and I announce it loud and proud, is that I am wrong a lot, and I
Yeah.
love being wrong. And I was one night we were sitting on the couch, and Leah and I were struggling, going through a tough time, and she had really wanted a dog for a long time,
Mhm.
and it was during the end of COVID, I guess wave one of COVID,
Mhm.
and life had changed. And I saw Pound Cake's picture, and I don't know why. I just saw him. I read a little
Yeah.
description about him, and I applied that night without telling Leah. And fortunately, in the end, we got him, and it changed our world.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah,
Yeah,
I can totally relate to you in that even like getting Harrison, I was so anxious about getting
yeah,
him. And people were telling me, like, what are you doing? Like, you should be traveling and all this other stuff. And
yeah,
I was like, screw it. I'm going to get him because I know that I need like a dog because I struggle still with like just the mental part of being human and just dealing with trauma and anxiety and everything else. Like, he's my emotional support animal. And he makes me
yeah.
smile like you as well.
Yeah, they are amazing, aren't they? Like they just have
Yeah.
never. There are no animals on this earth that love you like a dog does. And watching Harrison from your photos and videos from the time he was a puppy until now, he
Mhm.
looks like such a lovable, amazing dog.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing just like how dogs help, just like with
Yeah,
mental health and just even people that are like self-employed. Like I feel like it should be a requirement for everyone.
100%. And look, I'm the guy who said no to a dog over and over and over again. Now I'm wearing them on
Mhm.
my sweatshirt. So
Yeah.
if that shows you anything, like that's what can happen. And that's what I try to tell people.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I also
Yeah.
know at the same time that training a dog is so hard. We've been
Oof.
doing
Yeah.
group sessions and
Yeah.
one-on-one sessions with our trainer to get
Yeah.
Harrison like up to being a therapy dog.
Yep.
It's just so hard. And I can't even imagine like training a dog that's a rescue and has been through trauma and also a dog that's deaf as well. Like I just
Yeah.
can't imagine. Can you kind of share like how you do that and how you handle that?
Yeah. A lot of people ask about it, and I want to preface this by saying what I say to them, which is I am not a trainer. Okay. I went to before adopting the first dog, Leah and I like to say we went to YouTube University. I mean, we did a lot of research, a lot of research, but we are not dog trainers. But what we can do is at least share the experience that we've had. And you talked about kind of two things: the trauma and also the deafness, right?
Hmm.
And trauma, the two really different things to work with a dog on, in my experience. Being a deaf dog, I've had no issue training these dogs in terms of regular commands. They know
Hmm.
sign language. They know maybe 25 different hand signals, whether it's we're going for a ride, we're going to family's house, we're going to your friend's house, going to camp, sit, stay, what, all of that stuff. They're amazing learners, and
Hmm.
they are very much visual learners. So the same way you might train a regular dog through voice commands, you just do the same type of conditioning with different hand signals, and they'll pick up on it right away. So,
Hmm.
so if you're afraid of adopting a deaf dog because of training, please don't be. It's not something difficult to do. Just like any other animal, you need to devote time and attention to them. And I
Hmm.
hope folks who do rescue or adopt are ready to put the time in. They're not accessories to our life.
Yeah.
They are living lives of their own, and it's really really important that we understand that and make time and energy for them. But dealing with trauma has been the more challenging thing. So
Hmm.
the most recent dog, Milkshake, she again wasn't adopted for 3 years. Pound Cake was eight months when we got him,
Okay.
and Milkshake was at one point in time. We don't have all the details. She was in the prison system working with inmates and
Oh.
parolees. She was, I know, kept outside for a period of time at one of the shelters or rescues she was at in Georgia, and she just bounced around for a long period of time. And it is very clear that someone in her life was not kind to her. She's
Hmm.
really afraid. She has a lot of fear of people, and she was quite reactive when we got her. And people
Hmm.
make the mistake of thinking that reactive means aggressive. No, it means
Hmm.
scared. They're scared.
Yeah.
And so understanding that, and then just doing a lot of research on how to do reactivity training, conditioning, so that if they see a trigger, they look at you for a treat rather than
Hmm.
react in a fearful way. And the biggest thing is just time. Just you have to work with them every day. We
Yeah.
walked these dogs and trained these dogs through different little things we had learned
Hmm.
every single day without fail. And if you're going to adopt and you're going to adopt a dog with trauma, please be willing to put the time in, because the transformation is beautiful. 4 weeks ago, I couldn't go for a walk outside with my dog, and now it's as if she never had any trauma. That's
Yeah.
just 4 weeks ago. So I'm excited to see how far she can come in a few years.
That's crazy. And I feel
Yeah,
like, yeah, any dog, like any rescue or any like dog from a breeder, like it takes a lot of time I
Yeah.
know even for Harrison, it's like grooming him like every
Yeah.
single week. And a lot of people underestimate the amount of time that it takes. Like these dogs are so cute,
I don't
but
have that problem.
oh my God, he doesn't shed, but
Yeah. Yeah.
grooming him is a disaster.
You've got a bit more fur to deal with. We have two short coat dogs, so we don't have that issue. But
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's definitely worth it.
Oh, I mean, they rescue us at the end of the day, and that's how I really feel. It's not just something I say. They make life so much better. They've given me a sense of purpose.
Hmm.
We've been trying really hard through our page, to promote animal rescue and support different organizations and charities and rescues and shelters. And for me, that's been something that's given my life, a sense of purpose I didn't have before. So they're pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. I love what you've
Hmm.
done and just, yeah. So I want to go back a little bit
Mm,
more to your story because I want to
sure.
ask you a question. If you could go
Mm.
back 10 to 15 years from now and tell yourself anything, what would you tell yourself like before you started experimenting with alcohol and drugs? And
Oh, before I started
yeah,
experimenting with
like
alcohol. Okay.
before.
Um, wow. I would probably have told myself. I probably would have told myself that fears are not realities, and it's okay. It's okay to be afraid, and it's
Hmm.
okay to be fearful. It's okay um, to have anxiety. Just tell myself that I wasn't alone in those things, and
Hmm.
that other people feel them too, and whether they tell you or not. One of the biggest things that led to my use was a feeling of isolation, that I was different from everyone else and that there
Hmm.
was something wrong with me. And just through sharing, stories, connecting with people, and realizing that people are so similar, the way we think, the way we feel.
Hmm.
Only through that sense of, connectedness did I realize that there's hope for no matter what you're going through. And that's why I think, what you're doing here and this podcast and the work you do is so incredibly important, because we need to continue to show people that and normalize, the feelings people are going through, and especially
Hmm.
when they feel isolated like I used to before I started using. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what I'd tell myself.
I feel like it'd be nice to know that you're now like a dog dad of two dogs
Yeah,
and they bring
yeah.
you meaning. And
I
I
wouldn't have
feel,
believed it.
yeah, I know. I feel
Yeah,
like even the same with me. It's like I just wish that I had known that, okay, I got healthy and I came out to
yeah,
California and it did all this stuff, but I didn't know at the
yeah,
time. It just was kind of taking a step into the unknown with faith and
yeah,
hope that you could do it and handle the feelings of anxiety and just deal
yeah.
with
And
it.
I bet you never could have imagined it either. And that's the case for
Yeah.
me. This reality was impossible in my
Mhm.
mind. If I had listened to myself, what we're doing today, where I am, the place I live, my having my beautiful wife, my dogs, all of it was impossible. This was not
Mhm.
a reality, and I was convinced of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're absolutely right. It's amazing.
And it definitely makes you appreciate life a lot more, I
Mm,
think, as well.
yes, I completely agree.
So I have two more questions for this podcast.
All right.
So, one of the things that this podcast is about is just being your unique best self and owning who you are.
Yeah.
What are the things that make you not a standard?
Yeah, there's a big one that I'm now proud to share, but it's for me, and we talked about it just a little bit at the beginning. But my life was very publicly, um, kind of fell apart in a public setting.
Hmm.
I was exposed for all of the imperfections that I have, and my failures have been put out there. People have seen them. People have seen me struggle, go through difficult times, and lose everything. And after that, once everyone has seen that, once you've been exposed, once you
Hmm.
have shown that this image that you've created for yourself isn't necessarily um, who you really are, the fear of failure goes away.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean always, this is not a blanket statement for every moment in life, but in general, I don't fear failing anymore, which
Yeah.
allows me to take steps forward in uncomfortable situations.
Hmm.
And that is something that, if you had told me that my greatest strength one day would have been the fact that I lost everything, failed, and embarrassed myself and hurt my friends and family and all that stuff, it doesn't really compute. That's not something that seems like it makes a lot of sense. But the truth is, by going through that difficult time, and I know others who've struggled say the same thing, by experiencing that and by other people seeing that and having it be exposed, well, what's there to be afraid of anymore? So
Hmm.
if you're lying to anybody at that point, you're lying to yourself. And for me, it's been a huge strength, and something I think sets me apart from others.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So where can people go to learn more about you?
Yeah, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, I'm on Facebook now, which
Woohoo!
I haven't had a Facebook in like 9 years, so I don't even know how it works. But luckily, I can just post stuff from Instagram, goes right over. But if you're on any of those platforms, you can check us out at make.life.happen, and it is a page where you'll find a lot of different dog videos for sure. But you'll also, find my wife and I sharing our experience, strength, and hope. Some of the struggles we go through when things aren't good. I'm very open. I've decided to share publicly. My coworkers, friends, family, they all see this stuff, and it can be really scary to be vulnerable,
Hmm.
but we do that. But a lot of dog content. We really push animal rescue, and we have sponsored a lot of different charities and run some promotions this year to try to raise money for shelters and rescues. And I'm really proud to say that we've raised over $20,000
Woohoo!
to give to animal rescue initiatives in the last 6 months, and I'm hoping next year we can up that to $100,000 in 2024. So a
Wow.
lot of good stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Check us out if you're interested. Yeah, it's an interesting place.
I love that. I love what you're doing. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to end this podcast.
Mhm.
I just wanted to share a recent post that really touched me that you
Mm.
shared. And
Yeah.
within it, you shared that you didn't know if you ever feel like you know what you're doing on social media, and
Yeah.
that oftentimes you feel like an imposter. And you
Yeah.
continue to write that you don't feel like you deserve the kind compliments you receive because you focus on
Hmm.
what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share this with whoever's listening because number one, I feel like it shows the reality of social media and life. Like a lot
Yeah.
of us feel like imposters, a lot of us get way harder on ourselves than we need to be.
Yeah.
And number two, I just wanted to share something that helped me. And that was really to look at yourself as if you're a friend, like when these
Yeah.
negative thoughts come up. Because
Yeah.
chances are you wouldn't treat your friend as bad as yourself. And chances are that you'd be really proud of the person that you've become and all that you have done. Like I know I'm super proud of you and all that you've achieved. And yeah,
Likewise.
that's how I
And
look. Yeah, that's how
honestly,
I look at you.
you're so right, and thank you for sharing that. And it's true. A lot of times that's how I feel. But
Hmm.
that's again, being open and vulnerable about it and sharing it is gonna gonna connect with a lot more people.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about following you, and I've been inspired by you and your story. And so it's been really great to be able to do this. And
Hmm.
like I said earlier, I love that you've started this podcast too. It's
Yeah.
really exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much for just
For
being an
sure.
awesome person and just thank you for all the compliments. It really means a
Yeah, of
lot to
course.
me.
Yeah.
And with that being said, be sure to share this podcast with friends, hit that subscribe button, and follow James. Until next time, have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Woohoo!